Okay, now you should have audio. OBS likes to just forget things for whatever reason, so you tell me if you can hear anything. All right, very good. I don't know. I don't know what the deal is with OBS. So I go in, I change the settings, I make sure that everything's defaulted. I think I might have opened it when I didn't have the webcam connected, and it was like, oh, I don't know where your microphone went. Dumb. So. At any rate, all right, so it's 2 o'clock. It is time for prep for session 2, Chapter 1 of Storm King's Thunder. If you watched my recap, you have a pretty good idea of kind of what I'm planning, although I had to go through and take a look at some of the things and do a little more noodling on it. So we are going to talk about what's going to happen tomorrow night in Session 2. If you did not get a chance to watch that particular installment, don't worry, I'll get you up to speed, but you can always go on the YouTubes, catch up on demand. I know it's just an hour of me talking, so if you want to play it as a podcast, there's not necessarily always something to watch when I'm broadcasting, right? This is me talking to you mostly. Every once in a while, I throw up something on the screen that is important to share, and you can get most of this advice in audio format if you so choose. So that is the deal. That is the deal. We're talking Session 2. So there's a few things I just want to kind of logistically catch up on in terms of what happened after the first session. And we talked about some of this stuff on Thursday, so I'm not going to go into deep detail on what that, on how the player questionnaires worked or the bonds or anything like that. I just wanted to bring up a few things that I've, in the meantime, had a chance to look at. So, number one, I talked about, on Thursday, I talked about how the player questionnaire was going to be a little more useful down the road. And by down the road, I meant like basically today, right? So it just gave me, I had a chance to sit down and look at all of them and really go through and kind of put together, okay, well, who are my players and what are their play styles and what do they mean? So, I've got those sitting here, and it's a nice mix. We've got two people who play the trickster sneak. To me, that also indicates maybe a bigger inclination towards role-playing as opposed to role-playing of the variety of like role-playing an encounter out, as opposed to role-playing a variety of I have a catchphrase that I use whenever I smite evil with my sword and that sort of thing. So that's something to pay attention to. At least, I don't know, at this point, what I don't know is, are the questions informing what I experienced at the table, or is what I experienced at the table informing how I interpret the answers? The bottom line is, it doesn't matter. These things are designed, their whole purpose was just to help me categorize these people. So it's a little bit of chicken and the egg situation, but that's okay. Most of the guys responded, it's all guys at the table right now, responded that they like to play at mid-levels where they have adequate abilities, but any fight can become a challenge. I guess I was using this question as really sort of a test of like how gritty do they want their fights to be, how smash them up, trash them up do they want them to be, and the middle answer is I'm not sure it's going to bear out. The middle answer to me was, well, they want fights to be tough, but they don't want them to be too tough, right? So, I don't know. They got into that fight with two goblins and got kind of, two goblins and two wargs, to be fair. And they got kind of dinged up and they immediately were like, one of the vets in the group was like, let's take a short rest. And there was no reason that they couldn't. I rolled to see if any random encounters were going to we're going to ambush them, but that did not happen. So I don't know. It's tough to say because they're first level, and I don't blame them for taking a short rest because 6 hit points is, of damage is a lot of hit points. On the other hand, I guess they're not as brash as like sort of like a low level gritty kind of let's go out there and get things done. I don't know. It's because they're still first level. The way that this question, the purpose of this question, is not exactly going to pan itself out. So we'll see. We'll get a better idea when they get to be like fourth level and they really start building their character and they're not worried about taking a couple hits from goblins. Everybody on the alignment thing said, not everybody, 3 of the 4 characters said that, it has some wiggle room, it's a guideline, and then one of them said alignment is the backbone that defines a character. Now, what's interesting to me is that's the player who seems to have like the most interest in developing a full backstory for his character. He's indicated like, hey, I want to change some things about the history of my character and add some details and whatnot. And I think, this alignment question is kind of like a ding, okay, hello, like, maybe not necessarily. I was thinking that this would be more of an indicator of what a stickler for the rules they were going to be, but it might be more of an indicator how interested are they in having some very well-defined role-playing traits. So that's something that's all of this stuff is kind of like as we develop. I mean, it's not like these player questionnaires are a pass-fail thing. You can't. There's no wrong answer, and there's no definitive way to interpret these results. But I'm just reading through them, like I said, kind of trips off different things for me in terms of what their play style is going to be. In terms of, I have a question on here that is about. The party encounters a bald man in a red cloak who is pulling items from a scorched and burning wagon. What do you do? And there's a variety of options for that. 2 of them said, hail him, but keep one hand on your weapon. So, all right, that's all right. 1 person said, slip into the underbrush and observe. What's interesting to me is that's the cleric character, but I think it is a little bit like it is actually his playstyle. He is like he's still finding his way. Just to be clear, he's the one who's newest to the game, right? Like very like finding his way around the rules and not sure, but very enthusiastic. Like he doesn't need to have his hand held in terms of what he wants to do, but he has a different idea of what he wants to do. So, for instance, in our first session, they were getting attacked by the goblins. They started this fight with the goblins. He decided he had to keep the wagon safe, so he's like, I'm out of here. I'm going to circle the wagons and get out of here. I don't think that's the traditional response that you would expect from a seasoned player who's like, oh, it's a couple of goblins. I'm sure we can take them. I want to go in there and get my sword dirty. That was not his. He was like, I'm turning around and getting out. I want to protect the wagon, which was a fascinating choice for me. So this whole thing of kind of slip into the underbrush and observe, like it seems to indicate to me he's still feeling his way around. He's going to do things that are maybe, I don't want to call them unconventional because I thought the choice that he made sense within his character's priorities, but in terms of your traditional Dungeons and Dragons tropes, that's not traditional. My buddies are in a fight. I'm going to split the party and take the wagon out of the village, which I don't, then you're out with the wagon by yourself. It's interesting. It's not a tactic that I commonly see at a table full of experienced players. Not wrong, it's just different. So that's actually kind of refreshing. The 4th person who's playing the bard said distract him with a bluffed up story while the party moves in closer. This is like 100% on his play style. So if you watch the recap and listen to what happened last session, he was all about, I'm using prestidigitation to make lightning sparks fly from my experience, from my, I'm reading the chat at the same time. I'm making lightning sparks fly from my fingertips, and then I'm going to, in a booming voice, I'm going to say, move back! This totally plays into this thing. Shadzar asks a question, define experienced. What's an experienced Dungeons & Dragons player? I guess somebody who has you know, played for, I don't know, probably like 3 seasons, right? Two seasons of Adventures League, or two or 3 years of D&D under their belt, where they've played a number of different characters and have a feel for how powerful goblins are, right? So, I mean, admittedly, a tactical retreat is a valid tactic. However, this was initiative count 1 of the combat, and then nobody was dead. So it's an odd time to pull a tactical retreat. I didn't read his action that way. Although maybe that's exactly what he was doing. I don't know. That sort of thing I think is going to evidence itself more as we play. In terms of at the end of the season, I hope my PC has one of the following. 2 people said, the 2 newbies at the table both said has a signature magic item, which is cool. Like, I love that kind of stuff. And to be honest, even if they don't necessarily find the signature magic item or items in the game, it's easy to make a signature magic item by just giving a +1 longsword, a special name, and some history, and having it recognized by the fellow adventurers that they run across in the pubs, or having someone stop them on the streets of Waterdeep and say, "Oh, is that Goblin Biter? Is that the famed sword that slew Durgan Nineteeth?" That sort of thing. So I think I haven't finished reading the adventure, so I'm not entirely sure what sort of signature things they're going to find, but I'm not concerned about it. I think those are cool opportunities. Our veteran, dear phone, I don't need you to make any more noise. Okay, and thank you, and thank you. So, one of our veteran players said at the end of the season, I hope my PC has outwitted the enemy with a cunning plan. He does tend to play fairly tactically, although his character is a drunk, so sometimes those tactics get misinterpreted, right? That's a little tricky, because he was chasing the goblins who had stolen the wagon, and he kept, like, basically kind of yelling to the rest of the party, like, "This is a really dumb idea, we shouldn't be doing this," as he was chasing them. And then he got, or part of the party, at least some of the party, got shot by a couple of arrows, and they were like, "Yeah, you're right, we shouldn't be doing this." And then it got around to his initiative tick, and he's like, "Guys, I was just doing a bit. Like, we should have chased down those goblins." And the rest of the guys were like, "They were murdering us. That goblin in the back with the longbow, or with the short bow, was absolutely destroying us." So, so that's interesting. It'll be interesting to see whether he's going to be able to bring sort of tactical planning to bear. It's a little bit at odds with the current state of his character, who's kind of this drunken blowhard dwarf kind of guy. The final other veteran player said at the end of the season, I hope my PC is known and respected throughout the streets of Waterdeep. That's exactly what I would expect a bard to say. He plays his bard really well, so I don't blame him. The great thing is, like, this is also easily arranged, as long as you can make sure that the players do things that are famed, which is sort of your role as the dungeon master, right? So that's the player questionnaire. Let me see if I can get the Dropbox link here quick, and if you want to take a look at the actual thing, I'm happy to share it. That's what all this stuff is here for. So I don't want you to do that, computer, please. I want you to do this, and then I want to share this link. So I'm going to copy this link. I'm going to drop it in chat. So if you want to look at any of the materials that I'm referencing, for the most part, they're all right here in this Dropbox link. And I've got a couple maps in there, I've got the player questionnaires, I've got the bonds in there. All of the stuff that I've discussed is free for you to take a look at here for Chapter 1. So that's the player questionnaire. The next thing that we have on the docket. All right, DM party coordination. So what do I mean by this? I started doing this, I think it was either last season or 2 seasons ago. And I've done it in various forms with other parties that I've run. And now I was a player 2 seasons ago and last season. But I don't like giving people my email, and I don't like feeling like here's my problem with email. So the whole point here is I like to set up some sort of way for the party to communicate outside of sitting in the game shop, right? And or just outside of we're all friends and we're gonna get together in 2 weeks. Like for me, email is basically for one thing, and that is, are we playing on Saturday? That's all I really want to deal with in email. I don't want to have game concerns come filtering into my inbox. That's just not how I manage my life. So 2 seasons ago, I set up a Facebook group for my Adventurers League game. All the guys happened to be on Facebook, and we used it to coordinate with the DM to ask questions like, oh, sometimes you play right up until the end. It's like, how many experience points do we get? I'll tally it up and I'll email it to you. I don't want you to email it to me. You can just post it someplace. The thing that I like about whatever solution you come up with, so you could start a G+ circle, you could start a Facebook secret group. Nobody else has to know that you're posting in it. Or you can do a Slack channel. That's also super popular, although I don't know that it's really necessary. Like for me, Facebook was just, it's convenient. The point is, I like to communicate with the rest of the party in sort of an asynchronous fashion where I don't have to sit around and wait for somebody to answer or whatever. I can pop my question out there. I can come back in 3 hours. Somebody will have answered it, not answered it, whatever. I can look at it at my convenience and deal with it when I need to deal with it. So that's one of my, it seems like a very basic tip, but between Wednesday night and then Thursday morning I set up the group and finally kind of got everybody into it Thursday night. Now, as we get closer to the date, all these questions that some of the newbies have, what gods am I allowed to worship? Hey, what level do you think we're going to get to? Like all of this stuff that could really sort of start a distracting side conversation, or that we don't need to talk about. Like now we don't need to talk about it. So we're saving ourselves time at the game. And then also you're just sort of like bringing the party together. Like you have a place where you can tease each other about your, whatever happened last session, or you can communicate, guys, you know what, my wife's got to go to a thing, I need to watch the dog, I can't come on Wednesday night, or whatever, whatever that type of stuff is. So it doesn't, I guess it does, it's not like a bolt from the blue, like, oh, that is pure genius, what you just spouted there, I would have never thought. We used to, back in the days we had forums too, run a play-by-post game. But I guess the point being, it's easy to kind of forget about it, and it's such a valuable tool to communicate asynchronously, but without having to deal with sharing my email address and or just managing my email inbox, which is already full of 79 different Kickstarter project updates. So it's easy for that stuff to get lost in the noise, and I encourage you to find a place, whatever works for you, find a place to communicate with your party asynchronously outside of the session. Hey, we covered that. All right, so creature deck. On Thursday, I talked about how I don't want to drag my monster manual to every single session. I think the monster manual, I love the monster manual. When it came out, I was like, this is really great. I'm definitely a fan of the monster manual. I'm not a fan of lugging 40 pounds worth of stuff to my D&D game. I already have too much stuff in my apartment, and I don't want to carry it around. And as much as I love what's in the monster manual, when I'm sitting down to run a game, I don't need 3 paragraphs on what type of creature this is, and I don't necessarily need the backstory on what an ancient green dragon might hope to accomplish by establishing its lair within a shipwreck or whatever. That's not important. Yeah. Quintus brings up a great point, which is you can just photocopy the pages. You can scan it for your personal use. So I got these 5e creature cards at Gen Con, and I thought to myself, this is an ideal situation. This is an ideal opportunity for me to try out these cards, use them at the table, and just kind of give it a fly and see if I've actually saved myself either any time or any space. So one of the other considerations is table space is like this times 3, right? It's not, you can't see my arms, but I'm sitting at the end of the table of a regular 3x6 folding table. I don't have a lot of room to spread out a bunch of books, to have the adventure hardcover open, to have the monster manual open, have space for me to take notes, space for me to roll dice, any miniatures or note cards or props that I've got. One of my goals, as I said at the beginning of this whole process, was let's keep our space management as tight as possible. I'm not using a DM screen. I had the map out there, and I had the book, and I had a clipboard, and I don't think I even had the adventure on the table because I printed the adventure off in journal size. So that's my goal. I don't want to carry the monster manual. So what I did is I got some Ultra Pro sleeves from our favorite Amazon.com. And you know what? Let me pull one of these things up. I have things for you to share and enjoy. And it looks like this. All right, so I've got these cards that I've sleeved. They have 4 decks that are all of the SRD OGL creatures. This is made by Inkwell Ideas. It is not an officially licensed product like your spell cards are from Gale Force 9, and is not put out by Wizards. So, they're taking advantage of the OGL, just like people who, like the Tome of Beasts or anything like that, where they're making monsters for the game and whatnot. And so you can see that there's a lot of information on a very small form footprint, right? So that's super handy that I can flip this card out. I left the other one on the scanner. I can flip this card out and boom, I've got my encounter there. So that's pretty cool. There's 4 decks of them. It's about 250 cards. What that means is I went through and sleeved all of them. Oh boy. Hello everybody. Can you see? Not really. But that means I've got page after page. It ends up being about you can do 18 per sheet, so it ends up being 14 sheets of these things, right? Yeah, I'll take a look, everybody. Take a look. Drink it in. So I'm not sure that I'm saving myself room in my bag with this particular solution, and I'm going to kind of play this by ear and see how it goes. So what I don't like is, I mean, I have a whole monster manual of 14 pages, but by the time you get them sleeved and put them in a book and all that kind of stuff, it's probably about as heavy and takes up about as much space as my regular monster manual. On the other hand, I can't go like this and have my 2 encounters with my animated armor and my badger or whatever it is, right? So I can take these things out of the sleeve and have them here on the table. I don't have to have the book at the table. So that's the advantage that I'm looking for. We'll see if it plays out. I will say, so there's a couple, yeah, only carry the cards that you need. So that's a very good point, where if I was a real stickler, I could just go through the book, quick, pull them out, and have... My phone has decided to do some odd things. I could go through the book, pull out just the encounters that I needed to, and put those in a sleeve of, what do I need, like 10 cards, something like that. So I could bring those along, and that would be very lightweight. The only thing that kind of comes up that's a little weird is sometimes it'll be stuff like so last session, the wargs decided to attack the drafting horses that were pulling the card instead of attacking one of the players. One of the wargs went after one of the mules. Why? Because apparently I'm a softball GM who isn't willing to kill a player. But also I wanted to demonstrate to them what 2d6 plus 3 points of slashing damage looked like when you're a first level character. Well, if I hadn't pulled those cards, then now I got to punt a little bit, right? So if I bring them with me, then I have most of what I need. One downside is if it's not in the OGL/SRD, it's not in this deck, right? So some of the monsters, so we're looking at coming up, we've got the orcs. We're gonna have to deal with the ear seekers who are gonna come and threaten the town, right? Well, there's a bunch of orcs. That's easy. That's in here. There's an orc chieftain, not in the SRD, and there's an Eye of Grumph. Grumph. Now I'm thinking of Barky's Brigade. There's an Eye of Grumph priest, orc shaman, that is also going to show up, also not in the SRD. So that's an issue. I have a couple other. My other real nitpick here is, I wish that they had used a couple different fonts. I'm not a huge fan of the top font that they use for the names. I think this thing could have, a couple passes with a good graphic designer, keeping in mind that they're trying to get a lot of information in a very tiny space. But that's okay, right? I think it could be brushed up a little bit more than it currently presents. But you know what? I'm just looking for information. I just want to get the job done. These are going to do it. You can get them on drive-through. I can't remember. I paid I think they were I don't know, $12 a piece, but it was buy 3 get 1 free or something like that. So I think I paid about $40. So it was about $10 a deck. I don't know what they're currently going for. I'm trying to get a couple cards out here so I can show you one other thing. So if a monster is really super complicated, then what they do is they split it up into 2 cards. There's only a few monsters like this. The vampires like this, where they actually had so much info that they had to put it on 1 card. The dragons, what they do is they have 1 card for each age of the dragon. So they have young, adult, and ancient are the 3 versions that they have. And each of those fits on one card. But it's double-sided on 1 card. So they get 2 cards with 3 cards of information. The back of every card, I should have showed this earlier, has some decent artwork on it. I'm not going to use, I didn't buy it for the artwork. So, and honestly, I've got them double sleeved, so I can't really even see what's on the back. So the artwork is a nice bonus, but it's not, in my opinion, it's not the reason you buy the deck, right? So that's going to be an experiment. We'll see what happens. I'm going to have to print off some other stats, and I'm probably going to have to either, my scanner/copier doesn't do a great job of copying. It does a better job of scanning, so I may end up just typing stuff into a Word document and saving it. I'm not happy with the solution either, but what are you going to do? So that's that. Oh, I wanted to bring up a couple things that people brought in the chat. So somebody said, who was it? Was it Shadzar? It was Beak Gwenders said, have you considered cutting all the pages out of the monster manual, putting them in sheet protectors, and then just taking the pages you need, like the monstrous manual from 2E? I, I haven't considered doing that with the monster manual. It's not a bad idea. Having just spent 45 minutes last night, or maybe it was an hour last night, sleeving these things, I'm not sure I want to sleeve the whole book, but it's a good suggestion. It's definitely something to consider. It is a better suggestion than definitely what I'm doing, which is typing stuff into a Word document, or even making copies, because that's just extra paper. If you could keep it all in one place, take it out, bring it along, that would be great. So I like that suggestion. I think that's smart. So all right, very good. Mace is saying that the whole bundle is, the whole bundle might be $77, but pay attention to what's in that bundle, because that bundle maybe they have several additional monsters that were up converted from 3.5. So I don't know exactly what was in those, but those were monsters that, for better or for worse, either were official wizards in a previous edition and then they did a conversion pass on, or I just wasn't sure where they came from. I was basically just interested in the official wizards, SRD, those stats, those monsters. If I'm going to come up with some other monsters that aren't SRD, aren't wizards monsters, then right now, like, I'll turn to the Tome of Beefs. The Tome of Beefs! Look out! The Tome of Beasts from Cobalt Press is really great, and I backed the Kickstarter, so I have both the PDF and I have the actual book, so I can flip through the book and look at stuff if I want to, but I can just print out that individual page if I need to. And for my home game this past weekend, that was exactly like, I need an encounter. Click, 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 done. So that was great. That's the deal there. That's the deal there. So I'm not sure that the bundle includes all of the things that they necessarily. It might include more than what's just in the SRD stuff, the 5e system reference document. So that's the creature deck. It's an experiment. I'm going to try it this week. Like I said, there's a few things in there that are missing, and that's still some work, but I think I might save some work and get some portability. I might just end up pulling some of those cards out. I don't want to lose them is the issue. On the other hand, I've got enough sheet protectors where I could just make a sheet of what I've decided to bring with me. So, very good. So that is the creature deck. All right, that brings us around to basically prepping for the session, right? So in this half of the show, I'm going to talk about two different things, and one is just sort of my personal philosophy on prepping a session, especially a session that's a continuation from the previous action, right? And secondly, I'm going to talk through my brainstorm for what's going to happen in what I think is going to happen in my game tomorrow night. So it's a little bit of prep philosophy. It's a little bit of actual out loud brainstorm prep. So my basic take on what the DM's job is to think of, so whenever you're GMing, but particularly when you're prepping a session, and I've brought this up on Twitter, and it kind of bounced around a little bit, but I wanted to talk about it in a little more long-form context. Particularly when you're prepping for a session, I feel like the DM's job is to think, or to ask him or herself, what is the coolest possible thing that could happen next? And then present that to the players if you're given the opportunity, right? And I got I mean, there were certainly a number of people who were like, yes, absolutely. And there's a number of people who had questions about what that actually means or how you actually implement that, etc. Some people felt like it was not, it was a little over the top, right? Like you've got to have a baseline for reality in order to make those special things pop out. Yes, that's true. You're right. So your number one job as the GM is to make sure that everyone's having fun, right? So, uh, and the way that we generally do that in Dungeons and Dragons is we're creating some sort of interactive drama, right? So drama has high points, it has low points. Sometimes the drama is purely created through the mechanics of the game system, where the drama is you're down to 3 hit points and there are still 4 goblins left, and you have to figure out what you're going to do about that. Your back is up against the wall, and hopefully the climax of that particular dramatic thread is that you somehow manage to slay the 4 remaining goblins and perhaps even crit one of them in a turn of utmost daring do. So I agree that you have to have a baseline for what's happening next. But I would point out that like the coolest possible thing that could happen next does not mean that every 5 minutes Odin comes down on a cloud of candy cane ponies and a chariot made of drizzled caramel and hands out +5 longswords and plate mail of etherealness to everybody. Like, that sounds awful, for starters, but that's not necessarily, that might be a cool thing to happen. Like, hey, we had a an encounter with a demigod, and we actually like spoke to a creature of limitless power, and they cared what we said, and they gave us a blessing and guidance on our quest. Like that can be cool, but coolness is a couple things to me. To me, coolness is the coolest possible thing that can happen is something that shortcuts the action. Let's cut right to the heart of whatever conflict is laid before us. Heightens the stakes in a way that was maybe unforeseen, but certainly expands upon the drama that was going into the situation. And then finally, I think it surprises or delights the players, and that kind of ties into what I was saying before, that there's some sort of twist. Okay, that goes back to what I was saying about laying a baseline, because you can't have a twist unless you've paid out some rope, right? That metaphor tied a little too neatly together. But the point being that you really need to... So the heart of comedy, in my opinion, and this I think also applies to execution of a good twist, is comedy is something happens, and maybe it's odd, right? Then something happens again, which heightens how odd this thing was, and then the third time, the pattern is broken or revealed to be something other than what you thought it was, right? So, our simplest jokes are only 2 beats. It's a setup and a punchline. But honestly, like most, if you watch any kind of sitcoms like The Big Bang Theory and things like that, you're going to see a lot of like setup, joke, bump, joke. And the reason that those things pay off as funny is because on the third beat, the twist is revealed to be a misperception about what the previous 2 things were actually about. To me, that's what thinking of the next cool thing is about. It's not necessarily that it has to be funny. It's that you have set something up, the third thing is revealed to be something unexpected, but in hindsight, because it's recontextualized, you go, oh yeah, no, I see how that was paying off. So the coolest possible thing that could happen, that's it's not always when you're in combat. It's easy to go, what's the coolest possible way to interpret this result? Okay, but that does not mean that I have to take the result and burnish it in any particular extraordinary way. If the guy stabs the goblin for 3 points of damage, I don't have to describe how he does a triple black backflip and spins around and slices the goblin in the kidneys with his dagger, and the creature groans and screams in agony and points at him. Now, I could do that if I so chose, but it's 3 points of damage. I can say you lunge forward and it growls viciously, and then it yelps briefly as you pierce it with your dagger. That might be the coolest possible way to describe 3 points of damage in that moment, right? So you have to take it in context, and I think part of the issue of proselytizing on Twitter is that people don't get context because they get something RT'd to them that just comes out of nowhere, or even if there is context for it, it's buried in the stream somewhere, and they don't look like whether that person has replied, like it's part of a larger chain of conversation or whatever. So that's a tricky thing. So you have different opportunities to deploy the coolest possible thing that could happen, right? Your prime opportunities are a natural 20 happens or a killing blow happens. Let's reinterpret that result into something really cinematic and special and interesting and make your player feel like the spotlight is shining on them. You don't necessarily have to do it with every single little trade of combat back and forth. The other opportunity that we have is between sessions. You now get to look at, like, okay, these are the parts that they have digested. This is the piece of the plot that they have actually consumed. These are the parts that I know are out there, which I could deploy. They're missing jigsaw puzzle pieces that they didn't pick up on. And then out here somewhere is the future where I want them to go, what the events that are laid out before them, right? I had a good metaphor for what an adventure module is, but it's sort of like an adventure is sort of like playing Robo Rally, right? Where it's programmed for you what's supposed to happen, but then once everybody lays their cards down, everything goes like this, right? So the opportunity that we have between sessions to prep a session is to think about, okay, given what they know and what they're likely to act on, and given anything that's important that they missed, and given where we're probably going to go, let's think about some scenarios of the coolest possible things that could happen. I'm not going to say that you should railroad your players into a moment where I've planned this moment of genius reveal where the da-da-da-da-da. It's like, please don't. I hope that is not your takeaway from today's talk. But I do think you have the potential to plan some scenarios for what could happen and could be cool. So that way, depending upon how the plot unfolds, you have some stuff in your back pocket that you can bring to the table and offer up as like, okay, this is, I'm gonna feed this bit out there, and let's see, if they bite on it, and then which way they run with it. I'm gonna give you a dirty secret of good improvisation, which is plan ahead. Right? I mean, there's definitely a certain school of improv. The basic school of improv is you don't plan anything ahead, right? Guess what? Dungeons and Dragons is not pure improv, and you will never be fired from Dungeons and Dragons for having a few hip pocket voices that you do, for having a few bits that you kind of like had pre-planned. This could be cool if these things happen. You're going to be fine. And I will also tell you that every improviser has their go-to character that they lean on, their go-to character voice that they will use when the well is empty, some sort of go-to joke that they've heard before or a bit that they've played before that they won't necessarily roll out again, but they're like, oh, I know how that joke works. Improv is about learning structures, so teach yourself as many structures as you can and fill in those structures on the back end as much as you possibly can. That brings me to a side note, which is my suggestion: if you have downtime on a coffee break or at work, or you're sitting around and you don't have time, or you don't have your book with you to plan a huge session or to read up on what's happening next, or any of that sort of stuff, just carry some index cards with you and just start making on each index card either like a little location or a little NPC or a list of monster names, just little plug-and-play bits that you can refer to. I wish I had done more of this weekend. Then my party ended up talking to a bunch of different people, and I didn't have notes written down for a bunch of them. Is there a druid in the area? So, you know, if I get 10 minutes to burn, I whip out my stack of index cards and I write down druid. Oh, what are they? Elf? Yeah. Well, what's your name? Marwyn Elvenstar. Okay, well now I have most of a PC, and all I have to do is write down a couple attributes in terms of what they're like. He's haughty. He looks down on humans because he thinks they're inferior. I can roleplay that guy pretty well with that 12-word description, 10-word description. Do yourself a favor and put some things in the bank, right? So, that's just an aside. At this point, we got 15 minutes left. I do want to talk about what's going to happen next session. I know some of you had some questions. I'll try and get to them, but I may not get to them until we do our recap. So, a couple things are going to happen here, or a couple things are coming up. The party defeated half the goblins in town. There's 6 goblins left. They intimidated 3 of them to like go back to wherever, whatever little room you were hiding in. They now want to go directly to the keep, or at least, again, like the player disclaimer always needs to be in place, which is no plan survives contact with the player's own plan, even if it's the player's plan, right? So they said last week, we're gonna skip clearing out the rest of the town. We're going to head to the keep and see if anybody's there, and we're going to try and get over there and see what's going on. Great, fine. Now, this is why you can't plan too closely to what the players say they're going to do, is they could come back, and then when you have the recap of what they did and what they saw and what they thought about, they might go, oh yeah, you know what? Who did murder those goblins? I don't get it. I think my doorbell's going to ring in 10. Huh? Pretty good. Yeah. I saw the mailman walk by. At any rate, so keep in mind that every plan is fungible from week to week. They may have ended the session saying they're going to go to the keep. Might not happen. They might go scout the rest of the town. But ostensibly what they said is we're going to skip the rest of the town. We're not going to... We've dealt with the goblins, most of the goblins in town. We don't want to investigate any of the other buildings. Let's go see who's in the keep. So they're going to go talk to the guards over there, right? I think, as I said probably 2 prep sessions ago, I think these guards must absolutely be like the most chicken guards you have ever met in your life. Because theoretically, it's been 3 days and nobody has been like, I wonder what happened to my other buddies from the garrison and also all of the rest of the villagers. Like, the way that things are presented, it feels like it's been a couple hours at most. So I want these guys to just basically kind of be like a font of information of like, okay, well, so here's what happened. You explain the Cloud Giant attack, explain that they got drove off, explain that goblins came and, they don't know what to do, blah, blah, blah. But the important point is they're not really there to help. Now, the party may decide to try and spend the night taking a long rest. There's not really anything I can do about that. Or they may decide, well, let's go and investigate the rest of the town, make sure it's cleaned out, and make sure that we don't get ambushed by anything else creepy crawling in the night, right? All right, so as you may recall from last session, they had the opportunity to encounter Kella, but she successfully hid from them while they were chasing Mug down, or Gum down. Gum had that giant bag of foodstuffs of muffins and bread and rotten chicken and stuff, and they murdered Gum Gum like the horrible adventures that they are. So Kella Darkhope successfully got away, right? Or at least she hid herself. So I came upon the idea in talking through the recap on Thursday of, what if Kella's actually kind of a badass? What if Kella decides, okay, you know what, half the town is empty. Like, the town is mostly empty at this point. There's 6 goblins left. What if she just goes on a murder spree and takes out the remaining 6 goblins and kind of makes the town ready for infiltration by the Zhentarim? I think that's kind of cool. So if they decide to spend the night in the keep and get a long rest and do whatever they're gonna, hang out with the guards, then when they wake up in the morning, they're going to find, goblins strung up and garroted and, disemboweled from behind and all this kind of stuff, right? And maybe the drawbridge is up, or maybe not. Maybe she's just sitting in the tower waiting for, or maybe she's waiting out front like, hey boys, it did your job. I think it might be kind of a fun, I want to play her as a sympathetic character, or at least maybe like a little manipulative, maybe a little flirtatious. I think that'll probably play off pretty well in my party. I'm not sure how they're going to respond to the fact that she's a Zhent agent, right? Because at least 2 of them are Harpers, and it might be more than that. So that's something that's going to be tricky to play. However, I think even with those 4 guards, when Zolkin and the other 6 Zhent mercenaries or Zhent thugs show up, Zolkin has 65 hit points, all right? She has almost 30. If the 2 of them can't take out 4 first or second level adventurers and take out those 4 guards, they're not trying very hard, right? So I don't really see, they set the scenario up where it's like, well, maybe they'll take care of the 7 snakes, and I'm like, that is not happening. I don't see that unless they're second level. There's also disparity in the module where it says this should happen when the characters are second level, but before they've taken a long rest. And at least the way we play Adventures League, you can't level up until you've taken a long rest. So maybe I'm being too much of a stickler about throwing stuff at them when they're first level. On the other hand, I don't feel too bad about that. So I think the Zhents are basically going to kind of like make them an offer like, hey, we're here to hold down the fort, hold down the town, hold down the keep, and we're offering our services. And if you're willing to accept that, then we'll you've saved us some time. We'll owe you a favor. Now, 2 things about this. Number 1, the Ear Seekers come basically like right on their heels, right? And that's 20 orcs plus a wounded chief plus the Eye of Grumph, I keep saying Grumph, Eye of Grumph shaman, etc. Right? So the orcs show up right away. I don't like the orc encounter really at all as it's written, because unless they kill off the Zhents, I don't see why the Zhents wouldn't raise the drawbridge, and then the orcs just can't get in. Also, I don't like the idea that the Zhents are like, oh, there's 4 guards over in that keep, huh? Oh, hang on, that's a DC 10 athletics check. I think I'm gonna pass on that one. Whoa, hang on, guys. Like, it's a little weak. I can see the dilemma of the guards like, I don't know that they'd approve, but also their leader's dead. Like, I think the Zhents are actually kind of the ideal people to fill in the power vacuum, barring anyone else, except for maybe Morak, and who knows where he is. So I think I may modify the Ear Seekers encounter so that part of the wall has actually been demolished, and if they can't get through over the drawbridge, because the drawbridge has been raised, they're going to swim across the mountain. They're going to start coming in through a break in the palisade, which honestly sets up like a dramatic moment. It's this horde of 22 orcs comes storming towards them, but because there's a choke point, like the party actually like has the opportunity, maybe with the Zhents, with the guards in tow, to have an overwhelming victory against them. So I think all in all, like it all sort of like putting those pieces together slightly differently has it pay off better, right? So that's my kind of like what's the coolest possible thing that could happen. Number one, Kella shows herself off to be a badass. Now, if they don't decide to sleep, right? If they decide they're gonna, we are gonna talk to the town guards. We are gonna go back out into town and make sure that's secure. I have a perfect opportunity here for Kella to reveal herself as being in trouble. She's snuck out, or maybe she's gotten discovered by 3 goblins, and they've got her cornered, and they're taking stabs at her, and she kills one, but she doesn't look like she's going to be able to kill the other 2. Party comes in, saves her, and now she's indebted to them. It's not going to stop Zolkin from showing up. She can kind of like play them with a story or whatever it is, right? So that's where I'm not railroading my players. They have opportunities depending upon, if there's a third option, then I'm just going to have to wing it. But they're either going to sleep or they're not. If they sleep, they wake up to a bunch of strung up corpses. If they don't sleep, then they have this opportunity to go encounter Kella. Either of these things is cooler than what could possibly happen. Like, I mean, they've passed up the opportunity to meet her, right? So just having her show up, like, that doesn't work. So now I've been able to take what's been given, improvise a couple different scenarios of what might happen, and I have a couple of nice, cool, interesting, dramatic options. The other thing about the Zentarum that's going to pay off down the road is if you read ahead to Chapter 4, the party is supposed to get this cultist airship, right? The Dragon Cult, old Snort is supposed to send them a free dragon ship so that they can go back and forth between the various burial mounds of the Uthgard barbarians. And we'll talk about that all more in depth as we get closer to that chapter. But I felt like that really came out of the blue, and I would rather have it where if here in the beginning they've set up this thing, or an alliance with the Zentarum, maybe not necessarily explicitly joining them, but Kella and Zolkin are both like, okay, we owe you a favor. We're going to pay you back one day. You may not know when or how, but we're going to pay you back. And then in Chapter 4, this Dragon Cult airship shows up, but Kella and Zolkin are manning it. That to me is like, that's a cool payoff. Now I've like woven pieces of the plot together where they've probably forgotten about them at this point. But rather than having this dragon and these dragon cultists that they don't trust show up for no reason, and then there's this whole like convince them to use the ship when essentially it's just to help them save time and skip over encounters. Now I've got this exact same effect, but it pays off in something that I set up earlier. I think the Earseeker's battle, I've run, hold the gap type of battles before, and I think if they have the Zents and the guards join in, or just the Zents and the party, that'll be fine. Everything will be cool, and that'll be a fun battle to play. And then the final thing that I have to kind of like reckon with is they may go to the Dripping Caves, and I have not decided. Their wagon full of ale is at the Dripping Caves with Derp and Derp, Pojo, and Tot have stolen their wagon. So I'm thinking there's probably like fresh haunches of mule meat roasting over the fire and a bunch of drunken goblins celebrating as mightily as they can, which again like pays off to their advantage because they're fighting drunken goblins. But on the other hand, like they're drinking our ale. That's a cool moment where there's a consequence for the players that does not benefit the characters. It just pays off dramatically for the players. So I do have to get my mind around what I do have to get my mind around. Let's bring up the Dripping Caves while we're here. I do have to get my mind around what's going to happen with this particular scenario, given that there's 3 more goblins, given that there's 6 casks of ale. I'm sure Boss Hark is going to be kind of a jerk about it, but on the other hand, he probably sees the wisdom in saying, these 5 are mine, you guys split that one, and then everybody has a good time. I think it'll it'll provide for a fun. It paints a fun picture of that scenario, right? Even if it doesn't necessarily. It actually gives them a combat advantage, but that's all right. So I know some of you had questions. I would love to tackle those, but we are out of time today. I have to cut things off at 3 o'clock because coming up next, Jordan and Megan are continuing their survival. I believe it's called Expupaganza. It's their co-op horror show that they're going to keep playing until dawn together, and trying to survive the spookiest video games that they can possibly play. So thank you so much for joining me. We'll get a recap up on YouTube almost immediately. I will be back here Thursday at 4 o'clock Pacific, so we can talk through what happened. Obviously, there's some things behind the scenes that I'm going to have to do in the meantime. But I will go through the chat and pull out your questions and try and get some of those tackled. Also, please feel free to send things my way at Dungeon Bastard on Twitter. And you can also address things at Saving Throw Show or join our Patreon. And you can send messages through the Patreon system. And Dom Zook, who's our producer, will make sure that I get a hold of them and get to tackle them in an upcoming session. So I will see you all on Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific. Until then, let's dungeon.